Okay, so welcome to this deep dive,
Mm.
where we kind of get down into the nitty-gritty of a topic and,
Yeah,
pull out some key things you should know.
absolutely.
And we've got some really interesting source material today. It's this PDF called Hello and Welcome to Speak English and No More 2.pdf, which, you know, sounds like it's for
Yeah, just like a language learning.
language learning.
Yeah.
But it actually has some pretty good summaries of some very important
Yes,
science topics.
it does.
We're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at climate change, gene editing, and then space exploration.
That's right. We've got some excerpts from different experts on each topic. So, get a taste of climate change from a climate scientist and then dive into the world of gene editing with a geneticist and
Right.
blast off with an astrophysicist for space exploration.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start with climate change.
Okay.
The expert here is a climate scientist named Dr. John Smith. And so I guess the first question is, what is climate change? How can we, what's the basic thing we need to know about it?
So Dr. Smith really boils it down to long-term warming.
Okay.
And it's the long-term part that I think is really important here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We're not talking about just a little blip in temperature. We're talking about a sustained increase in the Earth's overall temperature. And this is being driven by, an increase in what we call greenhouse gases in the atmosphere.
Okay, so...
And these greenhouse gases basically act like a blanket around the Earth. They trap more heat.
So we're adding to that blanket that's already there.
Exactly. We're making it thicker.
Okay, and so...
So more heat gets trapped and the planet warms up.
Okay, that makes sense. And so the source material mentions that this has kind of a knock-on effect, it affects our weather and, the oceans, the ecosystem.
Right.
So how does that work?
Well, think about it this way. A warmer planet means that there's more energy in the system. And so that energy can fuel more extreme weather events.
Okay.
So you're going to see things like more intense and longer lasting heat waves.
Oh, wow.
Droughts become more severe, impacting our water resources and agriculture.
Okay.
And the storms we experience are likely to become stronger as well, causing, more damage.
That's pretty serious.
And we can't forget about rising sea levels.
Oh, right.
As the planet warms, the polar ice caps melt, and that extra water goes into the oceans, causing them to rise. And that obviously poses a huge threat to coastal communities.
Wow.
But it's not just humans that are affected. Ecosystems are really sensitive to these changes in temperature and precipitation patterns. So you'll see shifts in plant and animal life. Certain species might struggle to survive in their traditional habitats. Some might even go extinct.
Wow, that's pretty scary. So what are we doing to contribute to this? What are the causes?
So according to Dr. Smith, the primary driver is us. It's human activity.
Okay.
And the biggest culprit is the burning of fossil fuels. So things like coal, oil, and gas
Right.
that we use to power our homes, our cars, and our industries.
Right.
When we burn those fuels, we release a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And carbon dioxide is a major greenhouse gas.
Okay.
So that's a big contributor.
Yeah.
Then there's deforestation.
Okay.
Trees are amazing.
Yeah.
They naturally absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So when we cut down vast forests, we're essentially removing a natural way of removing those greenhouse gases. So that's another factor. And then there are also changes in land use.
Okay.
Converting forests to farmland, for example, which also contributes to these emissions.
I see.
So it's really the combined effect of all of these human actions that's altering the balance of the atmosphere.
So it's a lot of different things are contributing.
Exactly. It's not just one thing. It's a whole system.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good to know. And so it sounds like this is not some far off problem. This is a right now problem.
Exactly. That's what Dr. Smith emphasizes. We're already seeing the consequences of climate change today. It's not some distant threat.
Yeah.
We're experiencing more frequent and intense heat waves, which has direct impacts on human health. There are more widespread and severe droughts, leading to water shortages and, impacting our ability to grow food.
Right.
And we're seeing stronger storms causing more destruction.
So this is
it's happening.
It's already happened.
It's already happening.
Wow.
And it's affecting agriculture. It's affecting our access to clean water. It's affecting public health.
Okay.
So it's a very real and present issue.
Right. Okay. Well, that was a lot to take in on climate change.
Yeah. But I think we got a good handle on the basics.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So let's shift gears completely and talk about something totally different. Gene editing.
Okay.
So the source material here quotes a geneticist, Dr. Jane Doe.
Right.
And so I guess, the big question is, what is gene editing?
So Dr. Doe describes it as a technology that allows scientists to make very precise changes to an organism's DNA.
Okay.
And I think everyone probably knows DNA is like the instruction manual for life, right?
Yeah.
So it makes you, and me, and so on.
Yeah.
And gene editing tools allow us to go in and essentially edit specific parts of that instruction manual.
Wow.
And the main tool that's used nowadays, and the one that Dr. Doe mentioned specifically, is called CRISPR.
CRISPR.
Yeah, it stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
I know, right?
Okay.
But yeah, you don't really need to remember the full name, just CRISPR.
Nice CRISPR.
And think of CRISPR like a very, very precise pair of molecular scissors that can go in and find specific sequences in DNA and cut them or change them.
Okay.
So it's really
Or
revolutionary.
you can go in and like edit our genes.
Exactly. That's the idea.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so what are some of the things that we can do with that? Like, what are the potential
Applications.
applications? Yeah.
Well, the source highlights some really amazing possibilities.
Okay.
So one of the biggest ones is the potential to revolutionize the treatment of genetic diseases.
Okay.
So, you have diseases like cystic fibrosis or sickle cell anemia
Right.
that are caused by specific errors in our DNA. And with gene editing, we could potentially go in and correct those errors and cure these diseases.
Okay.
And it's not just limited to human health.
Okay.
Gene editing could also be used to significantly improve crop yields,
Okay.
make our food production more efficient and more sustainable.
Right.
And there's even talk about the possibility of bringing back extinct species,
Oh, wow.
which is a whole other can of worms ethically. But
Yeah.
it is something that's being discussed.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
it sounds like this is also pretty controversial.
it is. Yeah.
Like, what are some of the concerns?
Well, whenever you have a technology this powerful, there are going to be ethical considerations. And Dr. Doe really emphasizes that, especially when it comes to editing human embryos,
Right.
because those changes could then be passed down to future generations.
Oh, wow.
So we need to be very careful about, what kind of changes we make
Right.
and what the long-term societal implications might be.
So, like, we really need to think about
Yeah,
a lot
absolutely.
before we just go
We can't just jump in.
editing everything.
No.
Yeah.
We need to be very thoughtful about it.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's also the issue of safety and effectiveness.
Okay.
We need to make sure that these techniques are really precise and that they don't have any unintended consequences for individuals or for the environment.
We don't want to like fix one thing and then break 10 other things.
Exactly. That's the worry. So there's a lot of research and testing that needs to be done to ensure that these technologies are safe and effective.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Okay, so we've covered climate change. We've covered gene editing. Last but not least, let's talk about space exploration.
Let's do it.
So the expert quoted here is an astrophysicist named Dr. Bob Johnson.
Okay.
And so what is like the big thing right now in space exploration? Like, what's everyone working towards?
So Dr. Johnson points to sending humans to Mars.
Oh, wow.
And not just like a quick visit, but actually establishing a presence there, sometime in the 2030s is the goal that a lot of people are talking about.
Wow, and that's only like
I know it's not that far off.
10 years away.
Right.
That's crazy.
It is pretty wild.
And it sounds really hard.
It is. It's a hugely ambitious undertaking.
Yeah.
There are a lot of technological and logistical challenges that need to be overcome.
Okay, like what kind of challenges?
Well, the source mentions a few key ones.
Okay.
So one of the biggest ones is radiation exposure.
Okay.
Once you get beyond the Earth's protective atmosphere, astronauts are exposed to much higher levels of radiation from the sun and from cosmic rays.
Right.
And that can be really harmful over long durations. So that's a major concern.
Okay.
Then there's the distance. Mars is a long way away.
Yeah.
Which means that missions are going to take a really long time.
Yeah.
And that means you need spacecraft that are super reliable.
Right.
That can operate independently for years at a time.
Wow.
And then there's the issue of what they call sustainable life support.
Okay.
And that means essentially creating closed-loop systems on the spacecraft that can provide the astronauts with everything they need.
Okay.
Air, water, food waste.
Yeah.
Recycling all of that.
Right.
For potentially years at a time without having to rely on constant resupply from Earth.
Wow.
So it's a massive engineering challenge.
Right. Okay. So it's a really hard problem, but why bother? Like, why are we trying to do this? Like, what are the benefits?
That's a good question. And Dr. Johnson does address that in the source material.
Okay.
And he points out that space exploration isn't just about, reaching other planets.
Okay.
It's also about pushing the boundaries of science and technology. And that often leads to unexpected breakthroughs that benefit us here on Earth.
I see.
So, think about advancements in medicine, new materials, environmental monitoring technologies. All of these things can be driven by...
We're trying to solve this one really hard problem.
Yeah.
And then we accidentally solve all these other problems along the way.
Exactly. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Right.
And when you're trying to do something as challenging as sending humans to Mars, you're forced to come up with really creative solutions. And those solutions can often have applications in other areas.
Okay.
And then there's also the inspirational aspect of space exploration.
Right.
It captures the imagination of young people and inspires them to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, math.
Yeah, I can see that.
Which ultimately benefits society as a whole.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not just about like getting to Mars. It's about...
No, it's about so much more.
All the other stuff that happens.
Exactly.
It's
a journey.
Okay. So I guess what's next? Like, where do we go from here?
So Dr. Johnson outlines a few key steps in the source.
Okay.
So one of the big ones is establishing a sustainable presence on the moon.
Okay.
That's seen as a really important stepping stone.
Like that,
a testing ground.
Testing ground, yeah.
For a lot of the technologies and techniques that we'll need for a Mars mission and for even more ambitious missions beyond that.
Okay.
And then we'll continue to send robotic missions to other planets.
Okay.
To explore, gather data, scout out potential landing sites for humans.
Okay.
And, of course, we'll keep developing and using more powerful telescopes and other instruments to learn more about the universe.
So basically just keep exploring.
Keep exploring, absolutely.
Okay, well, this has been a really interesting deep dive. We've gone from, climate change, which is like right here, right now, to gene editing, which is kind of like this...
Like the future of life.
Like super futuristic,
yeah,
but also kind of scary thing.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, and then to space, which is like the ultimate...
The final frontier.
Frontier, yeah. And it's all in this PDF called Hello and Welcome to Speak English and No More 2.pdf, which is just crazy to me.
Yeah, it's not what you expect to find in a language learning guide.
Right, but it's all in there, and we've pulled out some really interesting stuff.
Definitely some food for thought.
Yeah, for sure. So, we talked about how gene editing can potentially change, the very building blocks of life.
Right.
And then we talked about how space exploration, is all about pushing the boundaries of where humans can go.
Yeah.
Like when you think about those two things together, it really makes you wonder, how will our understanding of what it means to be human change?
That's a great question.
In the next 100 years, 200 years.
Yeah. I mean, are we going to be editing our genes to make ourselves more adaptable to space travel, or are we going to be encountering new life forms that challenge our definition of what life even is?
Yeah.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
It is pretty mind-blowing. But yeah, that's a question for
another day.
For another day.
And for all of you out there to ponder.
Yeah, definitely something to think about. All right, well, that's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you later.